This is CBC Radio 1, 990 AM, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg.
Hi, I'm Saroja Coelho, host of the Saturday afternoon call-in show, Just Asking.
And I'm Ian Hannamansing, host of the Sunday afternoon call-in show, Cross Country Checkup.
Whether it's world events
or what's happening in your backyard,
every weekend we connect Canada live.
That's Just Asking with Saroja Coelho, Saturday afternoons at 4 Eastern.
And Cross Country Checkup with Ian Hannamansing, Sunday afternoons at 4 Eastern on CBC Radio 1.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon. I'm Rosanna Hempel. At 12 o'clock, it's 12 in Winnipeg. A mix of sun and cloud today, a high of 17. The president of the MGEU says a strike by healthcare support workers could be imminent. 25,000 workers represented by CUPE and MGEU have a strike deadline of next Tuesday. They say wages and working conditions have to improve. Kyle Ross says Shared Health came back yesterday with a disappointing offer.
Exactly the same offer. There was not a penny more. It was the exact same offer that our members have already rejected. It's really frustrating because I know Manitobans really want good healthcare right now, and getting a good deal for these workers, the workers that there's plenty of vacancies, that they're working, doing more with less, and we want to improve the healthcare system, and we're looking for a deal that'll do that, and unfortunately we're not seeing that at the table.
Ross says he's frustrated but still hopes a strike can be averted. Shared Health is warning Manitobans a strike could bring delays or cancellations in service. A Winnipeg City Hall committee votes today on making an accessible vehicle pilot project permanent. A report released last week said the program had improved service for people needing accessible vehicles for hire. But one advocate still has concerns. Cameron McLean reports.
The city launched the Wheelchair Accessible Vehicle Program 2 years ago. The program to reduce wait times for accessible rides has largely been successful. Wait times dropped from upwards of 2 hours to within 20 minutes, more than 90% of the time. The report recommends making the program permanent. Patrick Stewart of the Independent Living Resource Centre told the Public Works Committee the program is working, but worries reducing a surcharge from 7 cents to 3 cents and applying it to all rides could de-incentivize companies from offering accessible rides. Currently, companies are exempt from the charge if 10% of their vehicles are accessible. The committee will vote on the proposal later today. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A missing boy from Long Plain First Nation was last seen by family more than 2 weeks ago. Now police are asking for your help to find Cameron Joshua Bone. His family says the 13-year-old contacted his girlfriend on social media but would not say where he was. They worry about his safety and think he could be in Portage-la Prairie, Winnipeg, Brandon, or Thompson. Police also say Bone could be in danger. He's described as 5 feet, 1 tall with a shaved head. We have his photo up on our website. If you've seen him, you're asked to contact police. Now to some international news. With tension mounting across the Middle East, an emergency meeting was called today by the UN Security Council. Here's UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres.
It's high time to stop the sickening cycle of escalation after escalation that is leading the people of the Middle East straight over the cliff. Each escalation has served as a pretext for the next.
This as the world awaits Israel's response to yesterday's Iranian missile bombardment. Crystal Gumansing reports.
Zippy Hanavelli is Israel's ambassador to the UK. She says the strike should not be dismissed because no Israelis were killed.
The intentions matter, and the intentions of the Iranian regime was to target Israeli civilians.
An estimated 181 ballistic missiles were fired at Israel Tuesday night. Nearly all were intercepted. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Iran made a big mistake by attacking Israel and is vowing to strike back. Iran's chief of staff warned against that. Mohammad Bagheri says if Israel makes another move against Iran's sovereignty and territorial integrity, last night's strikes will be repeated with more intensity and Israel's infrastructure will be targeted. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took part in a G7 conference call today. Trudeau says Iran's missile strikes on Israel were discussed among the G7 leaders, quote, unreservedly condemning Iran for the bombardment. Back in Canada, the RCMP in British Columbia are investigating a violent video of a swarming incident in a Kelowna park. A teenage girl was allegedly attacked and the video shared online. Brady Strachan reports.
The 2-minute video shows a large group of youth surrounding a teenage girl at Gyro Beach Park. At one point, another girl appears to grab the teen by her hair and pull her to the ground. The girl is then punched in the head and face multiple times, as others look on, some of them cheering on the attacker.
They took her phone so she couldn't call for help anymore. Threw her phone back at her when she was laying there motionless after they were done dumping dirt on her head.
The victim's father says his daughter is 13 years old. CBC News is not identifying him or his daughter.
I wish I didn't watch that video. That was the most brutal beating that I can never unsee.
The RCMP say they're working to identify everyone in the video. Police say the incident is one of several they are investigating from Friday night involving youth criminality and assaults. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
That is the CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local CBC News is at 12:30.
Good afternoon, Manitoba. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. It's Wednesday, October 2nd. My name is Chloe Friesen. I'm filling in for Janet Stewart. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us. Coming up, a new report from the National Payroll Institute shows that financial stress among Canadians is up compared to last year, even though inflation and interest rates are going down. In today's call-in conversation, we want to hear from you. Do you talk openly about your finances? How does financial stress affect your day-to-day life? You can call us at 204-780-0893 after the 12:30 news, or text us 204-588-7355. But first up on Radio Noon, a Dauphin parent is calling on his local school board to be dissolved. We'll hear why coming up. Since the spring, the Mountain View School Division Board has been embroiled in controversy. One of its trustees, Paul Coffey, said in an April presentation to the board that residential schools were good and the term white privilege was, quote, racist. In June, 3 trustees stepped down and the division superintendent was fired. The province established an oversight committee to watch over the board, but the two groups have been butting heads. Most recently, over a board decision to ban the display of anything but Canadian and Manitoba flags. Now, one local parent has had enough with the board and is calling for it to be dissolved. Chris Lark is Métis, lives in Dauphin, and is the father of 2 daughters. One lives with global developmental delay. He spoke with the CBC's Chelsea Kemp.
I think it's really disheartening and disappointing. Growing up in the 80s and 90s and learning through the school system, how things used to be, how terrible society was to people that were marginalized, and seeing over those decades, the 80s, 90s, and into the 2000s, seeing society progress in a way that was moving towards understanding and inclusion, and then in recent years, reconciliation. That was really, really encouraging as a citizen. And to have the actions of the current school board as they are now out in the public like this, it's embarrassing. It's ridiculous. It is absolutely appalling and just disappointing as a whole. I think it reflects poorly not only on my community, but it reflects poorly on our society.
Do you find with the focus of the trustees, does that impact your kids' education?
I do. I think that there are far more important situations and issues at hand right now that we need to be dealing with. I don't believe that any of the issues raised in June or just recently on Monday have a positive impact on the education of my children. I feel we're taking steps back from what we've been teaching our children since they've been born. The old adage of just being good to each other, do to others as you would have them do to you. That's one of the fundamental things that you teach your children. And right now, by gosh, the folks that are in our school board currently, they are not practicing that one bit.
Is there a pattern of actions you've been concerned about as a parent?
I think, as part of my advocacy in my life, we have approached the school board in good faith with attempts to start conversations around inclusion itself. And we've gone into those discussions, again, like I say, with good faith. We haven't really had response either way, negative or positive, through them. And then in June, with the trustees resigning and Mr. Jadek being let go, it kind of started cluing us into perhaps that maybe there's an underlying agenda that's a part of the school board currently. Monday's actions, flying in the face of the committee that was appointed by the province, really does bring that to light. I feel that there is an agenda that the 4 remaining members of the board have that just has absolutely nothing to do with the education of our children. This decision to outright ban any flag other than the Canadian flag and the Manitoba flag, I don't understand how on an education level that has any bearing on my children whatsoever. We need to be focusing on hiring more teachers aides, creating inclusive, safe spaces in our schools for children to learn, for children that are marginalized, and to have grown-ups presenting themselves in this way and saying that they're representing children is just absolutely ridiculous to me.
That's Chris Lark, a parent with 2 kids in the Mountain View School Division. He was speaking with CBC's Chelsea Kemp. Education Minister Nello Altamar says the province is not considering dissolving the school board. CBC News reached out to the school board but has yet to receive a response. A by-election to choose 3 new trustees to replace the ones who resigned is set for October 30th. And you can find more on this story on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Your neighborhood, your community, your country, your world, your news that matters, news that belongs to you. Your World Tonight, every night, 7 days a week on CBC Radio 1, on demand on the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
12 minutes after 12 o'clock, you're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, 97.9 FM in Brandon, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. I'm Chloe Friesen, filling in for Janet Stewart. Thank you to Marshall Hodgins, our tech today, and Dylan Longhurst is our show director, with Kevin Nipatebo running the YouTube live stream. Hello to the folks watching via YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up on the show, she started going to the gym to get in shape, and now 5 years later, Jackie Broski is set to compete in the World Powerlifting Competition at 49 years old. We'll hear how she reached that goal and how she hopes to inspire others to find their strength through exercise. Also, still to come after your 12:30 news, our calling conversation. A new report from the National Payroll Institute shows that financial stress among Canadians is up compared to last year, even though inflation and interest rates are going down. Today we want to hear from you. Do you talk openly about your finances? How does financial stress affect your day-to-day life? Do you have tips and tricks that help you manage your money and your stress? You can call us after the 12:30 news at 204-780-0893 or text us. You can start texting us already. 204-588-7355. Senior lecturer in economics Moshe Lander will join us for a conversation on financial stress. Now imagine discovering a new sport just before the pandemic, then reaching world-class competitions just 5 years later. Now imagine doing that in your late 40s. Jackie Broski started powerlifting in 2019, and this week she'll compete at 2 international championships in South Africa at the age of 49. The CBC's Emily Brass had the chance to speak to her before she left at her home in Steinbach.
Hi. So let's go back to the beginning. How did you first get involved with powerlifting?
It was a decision to start getting more active again after my boys were starting to wind down with some of their sports, and I had a little bit more time on my hands. So I joined a CrossFit gym and got involved in CrossFit, and immediately fell in love with the barbell lifts. And once so then I switched to strength training completely. And then once I heard that I could compete, I just decided that's where I wanted to go. I knew that this was my thing.
So that spirit of competition was part of the motivation?
Well, I mean, I love the lifting. I would be doing this even if I wasn't competing, I'd still be lifting. But the competition, I'm a highly competitive person. So that just, that was like the icing on the cake. I love it.
And you mentioned your boys were grown at that point. I mean, where were you at personally at that point in your life?
Yeah, well, my boys were in high school, so they were older, not left the house yet. I was working as a realtor, and, I had, well, I wouldn't say a ton of time on my hands, but I was able to make time to get to the gym. Yeah.
Because, I mean, sometimes people start to feel like, well, I need some more activity in my life. Was that part of it?
That was definitely part of it. Yeah. Yeah. I was always active growing up and involved in lots of different sports and stuff. And then as I got older, I went to college and I actually studied music. And so sports and being active, that just all took a back seat as I focused on becoming a musician. And I realized very quickly that I didn't want to be a professional musician. I studied classical voice, and it's just it wasn't where I wanted to go with my life. So finding my way back to being active in sports, that felt like where I was supposed to be.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you made that discovery in 2019, then the pandemic hit. How did that change your approach to the sport?
Well, I didn't have equipment at home. And so the gym that I was part of, they were phenomenal. They rented a few of us, well, as many sets as they had, but a full weight set. And I took it home. And I didn't have a rack, but I mean, we just did what we could with, heaving back squats. So cleaning them up to my shoulders and then getting them on my back, we do what we can. And that's how I trained. So yeah, just did what I could to stay sane during the pandemic.
And now you're heading off to major competitions. Tell us, where are you going and what events are you going to compete in?
So we're heading to Sun City, South Africa. I qualified in March when I went to Westerns. I qualified to go to Worlds. So I was given a place on Team Canada, and I'm competing at 2 competitions. The International Powerlifting Federation, or IPF. This is their World's Masters level competition. So Masters being anyone over 40. And despite what people think, there's still a lot of high-level competition once you're a master. We're just older. That's it. But we still want to, we still want to be,
bring home gold.
Well, I was going to swear, but I won't.
So tell us, how is powerlifting different, a different sport than weightlifting?
I mean, lots of people just consider lifting weights weightlifting, but Olympic weightlifting is different. So they do the clean and jerk and the snatch. So they're very dynamic movements, and powerlifting is very controlled. So we put the weight on our back with a back squat down to depth. We've got to hit standards with getting low enough. Bench press, it's slow and controlled, bringing that bar down and driving it up, and in the deadlift, so lifting the bar from the ground. And again, there's always standards that we have to hit for all of our movements.
How has getting involved in powerlifting changed you over the past 5 years?
I would say, it's twofold. So physically, I've changed. I came into CrossFit initially because I was thinking, I've gained weight, I want to get back to what I used to be. My body has definitely changed, and I've put on a lot of muscle. But what I've learned, and I think this is the more important change, is that my confidence is like through the roof. We're told, especially as women, but men face this too, but we're told that we need to be this low body fat percentage, and that's how we need to go through life. And what I'm learning, and I'm also a sports nutritionist, so there's a lot of value to having muscle on your body and not taking your body fat percentage down as low as you can. I feel more confident in my skin now than I did when I was in my 20s.
Wow. So what would you say to someone out there listening who might be thinking, maybe I could do something like this?
Oh, come and join us. I'm a powerlifting coach at Cornerstone Barbell in Winnipeg, and we work with athletes of all ages, right from, we have some sub-juniors, which are, junior high and high school age, all the way up to 70-year-olds who are lifting and competing. There's a wide range, and not everybody wants to compete. Some people just want to get stronger. So that's what we do. You don't have to compete in powerlifting, but we're going to help you get stronger and help you be more mobile in your life.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jackie.
It was my pleasure.
Jackie Broski is a powerlifter from Steinbach. She was speaking with the CBC's Emily Brass last week before she left for 2 international championships this week in South Africa. 21 minutes after 12 o'clock. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Chloe Friesen, filling in for Janet Stewart. Now, there's evidence that eating honey can positively impact certain aspects of your health, and it turns out working with honey bees has benefits beyond the sweet results. A group at Kettle and Stony Point First Nation in southern Ontario has been cultivating honey and working with bees, and they've been noting mental health improvements. Rick Borkamp is the Honey Harvest Group facilitator at Kettle and Stony Point.
We started that program a year ago as part of our mental health and wellness hub and recovery program, which is a land-based program. We wanted to connect people with the land and working with, well, in this case, working directly with the bees, and sort of that connection of becoming more grounded. When you're working with bees, you really need to be kind of sort of relaxed and focused on what you're doing, because if you're working with thousands of bees and you're getting distracted, they can get a little irritable. When you're with the bees, part of being grounded is being aware of your surroundings and what you're doing at the moment. And when you're with the bees, you really need to be conscious of being calm and being present to the bees, to paying attention to what you're doing. And the bees, when you're working in a hive, ironically, it can be a very calming sort of experience. And I think especially when you look at how intricate and how connected honeybees in particular are with our environment, with our food supply, and all the different ways that honeybees have things that are medicinal in many ways. There are so many medicinal properties to items that we bring from the hive. So it teaches people to be more connected with their surroundings, with the earth, just more aware of themselves. For me, I find honeybees to be an amazing insect. They're one of the only insects that actually produce a food that humans can eat. And they're just, the way they work together in community speaks to how in our community, in human communities, how we need to work together to cooperate, to be self-sustaining and healing. And the bees are kind of a metaphor for that, or an example of that. And that's a lot of what we try to do in the land-based program, is to try to help people develop the skills and the connectedness within the community to bring healing and growth.
Rick Boerkamp is a beekeeper and the facilitator of the Kettle and Stony Point Bee Group in southern Ontario. And maybe not a fun fact about me, but I don't like honey. I'm kind of embarrassed to say it. It's a little too sweet for my taste. So it's nice to know that just being around bees can give you some health benefits. I'm getting thumbs down from the control room. I'm so sorry, folks. I do love bees. If that helps, I do love bees. We have snow in the province. Light snow right now at the Tadoule Lake Airport, 0 degrees in Tadoule Lake as well. Churchill at the airport, light rain and snow, currently 2 degrees there. And we could see flurries and rain showers in the forecast for Thompson. I am sure we will hear more details on some of those October flurries from CBC weather specialist Riley Laychuk. But to take your mind off of that, we've got a song. When she's not playing with the Waylon Jennies, Ruth Moody has carved herself quite the path as a solo artist. Wanderer is her most recent collection of songs. From it, this is Already Free. It's a beautiful tune there. That's Ruth Moody with Already Free. Here on Radio Noon, we are coming up to your local news. But first, I want to remind folks that our call-in conversation comes up just after your local news and weather update. And in today's call-in conversation, we're talking about financial stress. It used to be a topic that was discussed quietly. It's getting louder and louder, and we want to hear from you. How are you managing under the current financial strain? Are you cutting any costs to balance your budget? Do you talk about financial stress with your friends and family? You can call us at 204-780-0893 or text 204-588-7355. Economics lecturer Moshe Lander will join us coming up. But first, your CBC local news.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon, I'm Rosanna Hempel. At 12:30, it's 14 in Winnipeg. A mix of sun and cloud today, a high of 17. A Winnipeg City Hall committee votes today on making an accessible vehicle pilot project permanent. A report released last week said the program had improved service for people needing accessible vehicles for hire. But one advocate still has concerns. The CBC's Cameron McLean reports.
The city launched the Wheelchair Accessible Vehicle Program 2 years ago. The program to reduce wait times for accessible rides has largely been successful. Wait times dropped from upwards of 2 hours to within 20 minutes, more than 90% of the time. The report recommends making the program permanent. Patrick Stewart of the Independent Living Resource Centre told the Public Works Committee the program is working, but worries reducing a surcharge from 7 cents to 3 cents and applying it to all rides could de-incentivize companies from offering accessible rides. Currently, companies are exempt from the charge if 10% of their vehicles are accessible. The committee will vote on the proposal later today. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A missing boy from Long Plain First Nation was last seen by family more than 2 weeks ago. Now police are asking for your help in finding Cameron Joshua Bone. His family says the 13-year-old contacted his girlfriend on social media but would not say where he was. They worry about his safety and think he could be in Portage-la Prairie, Winnipeg, Brandon, or Thompson. Police also say Bone could be in danger. He's described as 5'1" with a shaved head. We have his photo up on our website. If you've seen him, you're asked to call police. Now to some international news. The UN Secretary General is urging parties involved in the widening conflict in the Middle East to return to diplomacy.
This deadly cycle of tit-for-tat violence must stop.
Antonio Guterres spoke at a Security Council meeting focused on yesterday's missile attack by Iran. American Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield is calling on members to sanction Iran for targeting Israel.
The Iranian regime will be held responsible for its actions, and we strongly warn against Iran or its proxies taking actions against the United States or for their actions against Israel.
Israel accuses the Secretary General of failing to unequivocally condemn the Iranian attack. Its foreign ministry has declared Guterres persona non grata, effectively barring him from entering the country. That is the CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local CBC News is at 1:30.
Thank you, Rosanna.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Rosanna Hempel. I'm Chloe Friesen, filling in here for Janet Stewart on Radio Noon. And CBC weather specialist Riley Lachuk joins us now in the studio. And Riley, I got some raised eyebrows and frowns from the control room here when I mentioned that there is snow in Manitoba today.
It's really hard to believe, and I'm still trying to wrap my own head around this.
Me too.
2-3 days ago, Sunday.
Yes.
Temperatures close to 30 for parts of southern Manitoba. And here we are on Wednesday talking about light snow in parts of the province. Only in Manitoba does this happen, I think.
A bit temperamental, our weather seems to be.
The way I described it on our 6 o'clock show last night was we really free fell into fall.
Yes.
It was like a free fall.
It's an appropriate word for the season.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Much more seasonal temperatures across southern Manitoba today, and I'll get into some of that light snow for parts of the north. Temperatures right now look like this: 14s for Gimli, Winnipeg, Steinbach, Portage at 15 this hour, 12 in Brandon, 9 in Swan River, Thompson's at 5, 1s and 2s along the Hudson Bay coast at the moment. That's where we're looking at some of that light snow into the far northern part of Manitoba. Generally, we're looking at a mix of sun and clouds. I know we did see a few scattered showers move through parts of southern Manitoba this morning. I know we did see a little bit of that in Winnipeg and through parts of south central Manitoba. But it's to the north as we still are seeing the effects of this area of low pressure over the Hudson Bay coast, bringing us a fairly good chance of some snow or some rain snow mixing through parts of the far north to Dooley Lake into the Churchill region in particular, along with some very gusty winds throughout the day today once again. Breezy through the south once again today as well, with those gusty northwest winds, all pulling some of that cooler air from the north down. Still, risk we could see some wet snow on and off through the far north. Even places like Flin Flon could see some mixing. Thompson, Lynn Lake looking at maybe some wet snow as well through the day today. More like showers into Shamattawa through the afternoon. That does clear out. We look at a mainly cloudy start to the day on Thursday, mainly sunny here in the south. General sun-cloud mix over the next couple of days. Again, sunnier conditions and much drier conditions province-wide as we get into Friday as that area of low pressure moves out. Looking at the winds today, we're looking at winds gusting upwards of 60, 70 along the Hudson Bay coast through Lynn Lake today. More like 20 gusting 40 for the rest of us in Manitoba. And into Thursday, we keep the winds once again, 20 gusting 40, but those do really start to drop off again once we get into Friday. So Friday, we turn the page once again to something a bit more sunnier and a bit more drier as well. Sun cloud mix across much of the rest of the province today. 16s for Brandon and Winnipeg, 15 in Gimli. Thompson looking at a high of 6 today. I've got Winnipeg at 13 tomorrow afternoon, 15 for Friday, 18. Slight chance we could see a couple of showers through the late part of Saturday, and then 17s and 18s back into Monday and Tuesday again.
All right, so that sun will return.
The sun will return. I will mention, too, that risk of frost persists early Friday morning.
Good to
getting
know
down to
for
0.
the gardeners.
Yeah.
I got some carrots and some beets to pull up, so
there you
that
go.
is good to know. Thank you,
We have
Riley.
a couple days warning.
Okay, perfect. That's CBC weather specialist Riley Lachuk. You're listening to Radio Noon, and it is now that time. It's time for a call-in conversation. And today's topic is one that people seem to be getting more comfortable with talking about with friends and family, and perhaps here on the radio if you do choose to call in today or send us a text. Financial stress among working Canadians has gone up this year, even though inflation and interest rates are going down. That's 40% stressed so far this year versus a 37% last year. Now, that's according to a recent report from the National Payroll Institute, and the rise is linked to housing costs and debt, with a report showing that nearly 60% of financially stressed Canadians are spending over 40% of their income on housing. But will decreasing interest rates make a difference? So we want to take it beyond the numbers this afternoon and hear from you. How is financial stress affecting your life? How are you managing under financial strain? Do you speak openly about your finances with friends and family, or do you keep it private? Does financial stress affect your productivity at work? You can call us at 204-780-0893. That's 204-780-0893. Or you can send us a text and we will read it on your behalf. That number is 204-588-7355. So, for some extra context on this topic, our guest today is Moshe Lander, Senior Lecturer in Economics at Concordia University. Welcome to the show, Moshe.
Hello.
So let's start with that new report from the National Payroll Institute. Nearly 60% of financially stressed Canadians are spending over 40% of their income on housing. What does that stat say to you?
It just shows you how messed up Canadian housing markets are. Winnipeg's no different than other cities, maybe just not on the same degree yet. The old rule of thumb was that you spend about a third of your income. And the difference between a third and 40% doesn't sound like much. But our purchasing power has been eroded in the last couple of years, and our productivity has been declining for about 30 years now. So our standard of living is stagnating to falling. So it's one of those situations then where every extra dollar that you're having to allocate towards housing probably means that almost a full dollar has to be taken out of somewhere else. And there's only so much that you can cut your food budget or your clothing budget. So a lot of that then means has to come out of, say, discretionary spending. You can't spend on the jets, you can't spend on the bombers. And you can't spend on basic things that you might need, gifts for the kids or other basic needs. And next thing you know, then that's causing your mind to wander, and you can find yourself under some degree of psychological stress as well.
Yeah, let's talk about what stress, financial stress might look like in someone's life beyond the stats and the numbers. In your research and your work, what do you hear about the effects of financial stress?
So one possible cause, or one possible manifestation, I guess, is when you're at work, your mind starts wandering. You start thinking about, oh my gosh, how much money am I going to get on this paycheck? Especially if you're working shifts or if it's gig economy where you don't have a stable paycheck. And next thing you know, your mind isn't fully at work. Even if you do have a stable job, you could be worried about, is the landlord going to increase rent? Or is there going to be some unexpected need for money? Say, the dog needs to go to the vet, or there's some school project that you need to go run out and buy stuff for your kids. Those types of things then can be a problem, because if you don't have a buffer of savings, and other studies are showing a lot of Canadians don't even have $500 in idle cash in case of an emergency. Again, you're not fully focused on your work. If you're spending your time at work texting your friends, loved ones, on the phone trying to make sure that they're safe or that they're taken care of, that can take away from you doing your work. And it spills over as well into your colleagues then. If they're reliant on you to deliver a certain good by a certain time and your mind isn't there, this can hold them back, and vice versa. If they're worried about their financial strain, it can hold up your ability to do your work. Add on top of all of that, you might not be sleeping well at night. Or in order to make ends meet, I said you have to take dollars out of somewhere else. And if you're taking it out of your food budget, one way that you can get lots of calories very cheaply is buying huge bags of potato chips or Doritos or something. And next thing you know, you're not eating well, and diabetes can be on the increase, heart disease can be on the increase, bad teeth can be on the increase if you have to start skipping at the dentist. All of those things can be drains on productivity because you're getting sick more often. And if you do get sick, it can be really consequential.
That's really interesting, the connection between financial stress and physical health. That's something that I don't think a lot of people connect. I don't connect that immediately, so that's really interesting. If you're listening and something is coming to mind, if you have something you want to share maybe about what you're cutting out, are you going to less, as Moshe said, Jets or Bombers games? Are you changing how you're shopping at the grocery store? Let us know. Give us a call, 204-780-0893, or you can text us at 204-588-7355. Now, Moshe, we've been hearing in the news about decreasing interest rates, inflation kind of decreasing as well. Does that have any real impact on Canadians' wallets? Are they feeling that relief yet?
Yet, probably not. Will they? Hopefully. The thing is that when interest rates were going up, one of the things that I was saying across the CBC network, including in Manitoba, was that it takes about 18 to 24 months for an interest rate increase to have its full impact on the economy. People just can't change their spending behavior at the snap of a finger. And so the interest rate goes up. You need to maybe renegotiate your mortgage. That takes some time, or you need to find ways that you're going to pay that extra line of credit cost or the extra interest on your credit card bill. Finding that money might be difficult and take some time. So the same thing's going to happen when the interest rate goes down. It's not going to magically change people's lives. If you have a variable rate mortgage where your payment is fixed, then the only thing that is happening right now is that more of your payment is going towards principal, less towards interest, and the length of time to pay off your mortgage has come down, but you don't actually have more cash in pocket. Line of credit, you should be able to find a little more cash in your pocket, but if you're over indebted to begin with, that money might not be helping you with your day-to-day expenses. It might just be used to pay down some of that line of credit or pay off some of your other debt that you've accumulated. If you have a fixed rate mortgage, if you are coming up for renewal in 2025, 2026, which I think 40% of Canadians are, there's a good chance then that your 3, 4, 5-year mortgage that you originally negotiated was at record lows. You're not going to renew at generational high numbers the way you would have at the beginning of this year, but you're going to renew at a higher rate. There's a reason they were record lows. And so that means then that now more money is going to be expected of you. If you want to keep your payments the same, you might have to negotiate for a longer mortgage period. And some of the gains that you thought you were making might be given back.
So there's still some time to wait before we start actually seeing and feeling the effects of interest rates and inflation going down. But something that we're seeing actually here in Manitoba, as of yesterday, Manitoba's minimum wage has increased from $15.30 an hour to $15.80 an hour. What sort of impact might an extra 50 cents an hour have on workers, if any?
It's not. Let's say that you're working full time. So full time, 2,000 hours over the course of a year, you get an extra 50 cents an hour, give or take. So that's $1,000. Claw back, say maybe 25% of it in some form of taxes. And so you're left with the equivalent of an extra $2 a day. So $2 a day is nothing to sneeze at, but that's not going to get you a coffee at Tim Hortons. So if your financial strain is to the point that a coffee a day is going to make the difference between survival and not, you got a lot bigger problems that the government needs to be helping you with than increasing the minimum wage. The other thing, of course, too, is that the minimum wage might be a short-term gain for some workers, but the medium to long-term consequences of higher minimum wages is that it's going to lead to the very people that need that minimum wage are going to quickly find themselves automated out of existence. If I'm hiring you at McDonald's to work for, say, $15.50 an hour, just to make up numbers, you were worth it when I was able to pay you the previous minimum wage, but you're not worth it at the new minimum wage. And so you're going to find yourself fired. That's the type of thing that minimum wage is never discussed. It has consequences for the labor market, and it's usually the most needy people that are the most likely to be displaced by a higher minimum wage in the first place. So it doesn't even protect the people that you thought it was going to. It's good politics, but it's really bad economics.
Have we seen any cases in Canada of improved financial stress after minimum wage was raised or changed in any sense?
Sadly, no. The only way that minimum wage would actually help you is if, let's say, you produce $20 worth of goods for my company, and I was paying you $15.20 an hour. Now I'm paying you $15.80 an hour. You'll still keep your job because you're producing $20 worth of stuff. But unfortunately, as a business, because my costs have now gone up, I'm going to look to try and pass some of those cost increases on to my customers. And the very worker that's getting that higher minimum wage, if they are a customer of the business at which they work, they're going to find that the prices of the goods that they're buying has gone up as well. And so it could actually claw back some of the gains that they're making. But again, it's good politics. It's very easy when you want to try and explain to people that are struggling from cost of living issues what the real concerns are. It's easier to just say, you know what, here's a higher minimum wage, and that solves everything. But it's also important to note, too, Manitoba, the vast majority of people live in Winnipeg. But the minimum wage that's needed to live in Winnipeg, if you're going to be at, say, Portage in Maine and live in that area, that's a very different minimum wage that you need than if you're living up in Flin Flon. And so there, too, just increasing minimum wage doesn't even have the same distributional effects on everybody. People in Winnipeg are probably going to say, this doesn't go even remotely far enough. And if you're living up in the northern part of the province, you might say, the extra money's great, but it's not really the type of thing that I needed anyway, because the minimum wage would stretch further up north than it does down in the south.
And if you're listening and you want to weigh in, if you are thinking about this minimum wage change that just happened yesterday, you can give us a call, 204-780-0893. Share your thoughts with myself and our guest, Moshe Lander, Senior Lecturer in Economics at Concordia University. Or you can text us, 204-588-7355. And Moshe, it's been a little bit quiet today on the lines, but it kind of, in my mind, it kind of makes sense as finances don't seem to be the easiest thing for folks to talk about. But in your work, are you noticing that more people are talking openly about their finances and financial stress? Is this something people are being more open and honest about?
To some extent. I think everybody in Canada is always a little worried about talking about their finances publicly because we're always worried about Canada revenue listening and the implications for what that means in a country where taxes are a little on the high side. But yeah, I think when everybody has a shared experience, it's a little bit easier to talk about. And so one of the changes that we've seen in Canada over the last decade is a little bit more acceptance of mental health issues because everybody started to realize that what nobody was talking about, a lot more people were experiencing than they wanted to say. And so I think because all of us went through COVID, all of us went through the period of high inflation by Canadian standards, at least over the last couple of years, everybody, whether you're rich or poor, whether you live in the prairies or whether you live in the Atlantic provinces, everybody had essentially the same experience. And so it's a little bit easier then to comment, and everybody will have some element of sympathy or empathy for you because they will have experienced it themselves, or they'll have known someone very, very close by that's experienced it. It's kind of the same sort of thing when you talk about cancer. Everybody knows somebody or is somebody who's had it. It's a little bit easier to talk about, but there's some diseases that are a little bit more quiet because you don't think that people would understand where you're coming from. This is one of those things that everybody can understand.
I know we've had interviews about the different titles and terms and trends, or the names that trends are given, and one recently was loud budgeting. Is that something you think is effective? And from my understanding, it's just being very honest and loud about your financial choices. Like, oh, I'm not telling friends that you're not going to go out because you don't want to spend that money. Do you think loud budgeting is an effective way to kind of manage or think about your finances?
I think that any format that has some sort of monitoring and enforcement is effective. So if you lack the self-discipline to impose a budget on yourself, loud budgeting can be a way to at least try and make some sort of monitoring possible. And that makes it a little bit easier then for you to stick to your budget. If you say, I'm not going out, and then you go out, you're going to get a, wait a second, I thought you said you weren't going out. It's kind of almost like a shame and guilt approach to what are you doing?
Right.
Especially if that's somebody who's reliant on your budgeting to support them, whether that's a spouse or children. When it's pointed out, it makes it a little bit easier to stick to it. So I'm good with that idea. The idea of handing over your money to somebody else to manage it and living on an allowance, even though you're an adult and it's a little bit demeaning to say that I live on an allowance. If you know that you can't control yourself, then just give your paycheck to somebody that you do trust and say, listen, this is what I'm budgeting for food or for even entertainment, which is fine, but don't let me exceed that. You can even do it with your credit card. You can put limits on how much you can spend in various categories. And so there too, the bank is a little less forgiving, although you're the one who's putting in your own limits. But the idea is that they can tell you when you're spending beyond what you would allocate it, or give you a cautionary note. It's no different than cell phone providers. Once you reach like a certain percentage of your data limit, you get that notification that says you've passed 50%, 75%, 90%. That type of constant reminder can help as well.
Right. I'm getting flashbacks to when I got my allowance as a kid and how excited I would be. I got it monthly, and it was always at the beginning of the month, and I would just be thrilled. And then you start thinking about how you're going to spend it. So it's an interesting idea that even adults are doing that as well. We got a text from Julian who has a tip of taking a bike or a bus instead of driving your own car as a way to help save money. What sort of tips? You mentioned a few, but where do you find that? Where should folks go if they're just ready and they want to start saving money and doing these little things, but don't know where to start? It can feel overwhelming.
It can be, and any step is a good step. You don't have to do it all or nothing. And I think that's a lot of what we see people struggling with, is that they say, well, I don't have enough to save to reach retirement, or I don't have enough to save to buy a house. Okay, who said that you have to save to do those things? How about saving so that you have a couple $100s at the end of the year as a buffer, just in case something comes up? Or how about you get used to saving, even if it's $5 or $10, you would never think about missing your cell phone bill. You'd never think about missing your mortgage payment or your rent payment. You should never think about missing your saving payment. And so the idea that you should set aside some of that money out of your paycheck as an expense that's never to be missed can help you meet some basic goals. I think that the other thing too is to, you're talking about loud budgeting. Be honest with yourself. What's it exactly that you need? And what is it that you want but don't really need? So your texter there that commented on the idea of bike and bus. So a lot of people that will say, I'm not biking. I need to go to work by car. Okay, carpool. Or can you live closer to work? Or is there a way that you can take maybe a bus one way and a car back the other? A car is a terrible investment these days. 90% of the time it sits idle. So you're paying for an asset that depreciates, that's going to lose its value by just sitting there. So I will tell you, I gave up my car about 15 years ago. Thankfully, I live in cities that have good public infrastructure. But one of the things that I'll do, for example, is I'll walk to the grocery store, but I might take an Uber back because I don't want to try and bring all my groceries on. If I had a car, of course, I'd drive everywhere. And so there's a way that you can cut money out where maybe it's just you're cutting it in one direction, not both directions. Those types of things add up. And so it's small steps that can really make a difference.
Now, Moshe, we actually have a caller on the line. Robert joins us now. Hi, Robert. You have a comment about just how costs have changed over the years?
Yes. It's been 40 years this October since we got married. And life was much simpler then. There was no satellite TV, no internet bills, no cell phone bills, no cars were incredibly cheaper. I think, and we've got bigger houses now than we had. Are we trying to live too fancy a lifestyle compared to our parents? Like, I'm sure it used to be 1,000 square foot house was sufficient. I don't think anybody would live in a 1,000 square foot house now.
Robert, well, first of all, thank you for your call, and also congratulations on your anniversary. All right. Yeah. So, Moshe, what do you think about what Robert had to say? Are folks living beyond their means, or do you notice that people are wanting those bigger houses, those better things than they did back 40 years ago?
I think that's a bit of an illusion. I understand where he's coming from, and I can certainly, listening to what he was saying, congratulations on 40 years of marriage. I was a child then, but I think back to when I was a kid, and yeah, things were different, but I don't know necessarily that they were more affordable or that they were better. You were talking about getting allowance. I won't ask you what your allowance was when you were a child. I'll tell you that my first job was for $3.75 an hour. What I was able to buy with that $3.75 in purchasing power terms probably isn't necessarily the same as what minimum wage gets you now. But life has also changed. Where Robert was talking about maybe living beyond our means. Families back in the 1980s might have had 2 cars. 1 car is a little more common now. People would have had multiple TVs in their home. TVs are way cheaper now. And of course, you don't even need a TV. You can watch everything on your phone. Your phone is way more powerful. Back then, they were big cubes anchored into the floor of your car. Now it's your walking Encyclopedia Britannica. So, the world has kind of changed. I do understand that it looks like it's a more lavish lifestyle, but I have a feeling that if we talk to people in the 1980s and they would talk about their life back in the 1940s, they'd say the 1980s was a pretty lavish lifestyle comparatively as well, if you go back 40 years. So I don't know that the comparison is perfectly appropriate.
But definitely interesting to think about there. Moshe, lastly here, looking ahead, do you think the financial situation for Canadians is likely to improve in the coming months?
No, I try to be I try to be the optimist economist, but unfortunately, I don't see a lot of good coming this. Interest rates are going to go down substantially over the next 12 months. That's good news. But the biggest problem that we face in Canada right now, maybe it's for a different show, is productivity has been lagging in this country for 30 years. And when productivity lags, standard of living lags with it. And I think that's maybe more to Robert's point, is that we're looking at a standard of living now that's maybe lower than what we would have had back in the 1980s because of productivity. And if the government doesn't step in and do something soon to try and help us boost productivity, then we will be the first generation to experience a lower standard of living than what our parents had.
Well, Moshe, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your honesty.
Anytime.
Moshe Lander is a senior lecturer in economics at Concordia University in Montreal. And a big thank you to the folks that texted and called this afternoon. Still lots to come after Radio Noon is over at 3 o'clock. Up to Speed gets started. Faith Fundal, host, is here now for a look ahead at what's to come.
Chloe, what do you get when a group of G7 leaders get lost in the woods in the middle of an unspecified global crisis? It is the premise behind a Winnipeg director's new film. Guy Madden's going to join us live in studio for more on his film Rumors. It sounded like a joke, but it's not.
I was really working to answer that question, so I'm grateful that you did for me.
We'll hear more from him, and we're going to hear from Desiree Dorian about her 7th studio album, Remember Your Name, and the photo that started it all. We'll have that conversation coming up in our 5 o'clock half hour at 5:20, so stay tuned for that and others coming up on the program.
Thank you very much, Faith.
Thank you.
That is host of Up to Speed, Faith Fundal. That show starts at 3 o'clock and runs until 6 p.m. You'll definitely want to tune into that. And thank you for tuning in to Radio Noon. Our technician today, Marshall Hodgins, thank you. Dylan Longhurst was our director. Kevin Nipatebo was in charge of our YouTube live stream, making us look so lovely. You could see his hand there if you're looking at YouTube. you can't miss out. You got to tune in to see Kevin's hands. Coming up on CBC Radio 1 is Writers and Company. I'm Chloe Friesen, filling in for Janet Stewart. Thank you for tuning in and have a lovely afternoon.